first episode of Careernet Prism's DEI-LOGS. DEI-LOGS discusses everything diversity and inclusion. We invite leaders and champions in the field of diversity and inclusion across industries and sectors. And today we have with us someone very, very special to kick off our very first episode. We have with us Mr. Roy Thomas. Mr. Roy Thomas is a person who's practically dedicated his life to diversity and inclusion. He started off as the program manager, diversity and inclusion at Dell Technologies, and then moved on to be the global lead, diversity and inclusion at Pulse Secure. And today, Roy heads the diversity and inclusion wing of the Nasscom Foundation. A very warm welcome to you, Roy. Thank you for being a part of DEI-LOGS. It's a pleasure to have you here and you representing your organization, the Nasscom Foundation. So thank you very much for coming in. Let's begin by discussing your life journey. So you started off as a service expert at Dell, and from there you went on to be the head of diversity and inclusion at Nasscom Foundation. So what's been your life journey, and what were some of those milestone moments, that completely changed you from what you were doing to the DEI expert here today?
First of all, thank you so much for having me as a part of this forum, Dilshad. It's a pleasure. I know it's an ongoing engagement that we have at Nasscom Foundation and Careernet. So looking back of where I started my career to where I am, I would say it's a very conscious decision. And it's got a lot to do with my upbringing and my formative years, I would say, which sort of inspired me. And those are some of the key milestones that I always carry with me. So going back in time, when I was a child, and how I was brought up, or the place that I grew up in, had a lot to do with the community and society. So I would say 18 years of my life, upbringing in school, was to do a lot with the community, building awareness on alcohol abuse, drug abuse. Also, the community that I lived in had an orphanage and an old age home for old people with HIV and cancer. It's like the end of life support that they get. So a lot of these formative years and experience contributed to where I am. While I started working as a frontline agent in the tech support space and did various roles of coaching, country operations, and then had completed about a decade of my career life. At that point, I took a step back to really reflect upon what is that I really want to do, and what is that I really value, and what is that I enjoy doing. And that's when it went back to the early days that I spoke about, giving back to the community. And the closest that I could relate to in a corporate space was your employee resource groups and your D&I teams. And I was very much involved in volunteering. And that was the start. And I had the opportunity to work for the Dell's diversity and inclusion team. And that was a great opportunity. And I think it also adds up to the kind of leaders that you have who really are passionate about the space. And in one way or the other, I was lucky to have leaders that have inspired me to grow in this space. And it was purely out of a lot of interest. And like I said, it's a very conscious and well thought, reflected decision to be in this space. And I'm really happy that I work in the social sector.
That's great.
For an amazing organization like Nasscom Foundation with a great leader like Nidhi Bhasin, who's our CEO. And I can't think of a better opportunity and a place to be in.
Wonderful. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you once mentioning a friend of yours who was deaf, and I guess that also had some sort of an impact.
Totally.
Yeah, so if you...
I would call it exposure, right? In simple terms. Exposure to the community and the real life stories and experiences of people totally contribute to who you are. And I had this deaf friend, like I told you, his name was Maruti. I grew up with him. 10-15 years of my early life was with him. And at that point, none of us knew what sign language was. He didn't know what sign language was. We didn't even know it existed. but we had our own sign language. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this to you. It was in a small village, and if people had to have a serious communication with him, they would call me as the interpreter because I was the only person who could understand what he was trying to say. And it totally adds up to my exposure at this point as well.
Correct. So your inclusion journey started that soon in
yes,
life.
Absolutely.
And then it was a conscious decision. I guess not many people get to make that choice. I guess most of them just get pushed into it by their managers. They see some streak of compassion in them and say, why don't you head D&I? So for you, it was a very conscious decision. So.
Yeah, it is a conscious decision and a life experience, I would say. Why I would relate it a little more than most people do. And there's nothing wrong with people who don't, because it's purely lack of exposure. And that's exactly what people like you and I and all the D&I experts work towards today.
Exactly.
To give them that exposure, to create
Correct.
that experience
Awareness.
zone and
Yes.
awareness and all of that.
Yes, absolutely. So now let's talk about your work at Nasscom Foundation itself. One of your very innovative programs, right, was Women Wizards Rule Tech. So the first basic question is, how did that program and how did the name come about? And what do you think, in what ways has it really had an impact on, is it for women returnees? So it's women returning to work?
Yeah.
So what kind of impact? And how do you think companies have received it, right? And how has it really changed lives for women who are coming back after a career break?
Sure. So this is an amazingly interesting program, right? I mean, I was introduced to this when I joined Nasscom Foundation, when I took over and started heading this program. So I've been doing that for the last 2 years. And the inception of this program was during one of our global inclusion summits in 2018, when Nasscom and Foundation as an industry body was trying to see how we could bridge the gender gap in the Indian tech industry. Right. While, as you go up the level, when you reach the C-suite level, the representation is less than 9%. So the whole idea was to see how can we sustain the workforce between the mid-management and senior management. And hence we initiated this program called Women Wizards Rule Tech. And this is all about upskilling working women in technology. Right. So we focus on 7 emerging technologies at this point,
right,
accompanied by professional life skills and role model sessions and all of that. And the beauty of an initiative like this is that, you have tons of leaders and industry tech experts that come together on a pro bono basis to contribute to this cause.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So we grew with less than 24 organizations about 2 years back. Right. And at this point, we are over 92 organizations, having upskilled over 12,600 women in technology. Wow. And if you ask me about the success story, it's that over 60% of the past cohorts have grown into a bigger role in the organization.
Amazing.
So that's a huge success
Amazing.
story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then we continue to have more and more interest. And now's the time we're also thinking of expanding that framework and program to other marginalized groups.
That's wonderful. And we did speak about that. That's absolutely amazing. So another program of yours, which I know was started by you, since Women Wizards wasn't, but I know the Dell Thousand. Right, the Dell Thousand.
Mission 1000.
Yeah, Mission 1000 was started by you at Dell, and that was to provide employment to at least 1,000 persons with disabilities. Right. So, how did that come about? A little about that, and what were the challenges that you think, or rather the barriers? So, barriers in the minds of employers to give opportunities to persons with disabilities.
Yeah. So this was an interesting initiative that was actually started by Enable India. So Enable India started this campaign called Mission 1000, which was to create 1,000 opportunities for 1,000 people with disabilities in 1,000 days. Right? And at the launch of this program, one of our leaders from Dell, he committed to
starting a similar
the Dell's own Mission 1000, and hence Dell Mission 1000 started.
Okay.
And it's just not me, there were multiple other people, and the other person that I can think of is Deepa Narasimhan, who was at that point the head of D&I at Dell. And both of us together, I was program managing diversity and inclusion, and both of us together put a really amazing plan of how we could create those opportunities. And talking about opportunities is just not direct. It's just not about employment. I mean, it's really difficult to employ 1,000 people with disabilities. And for somebody who doesn't understand the space and you're going to them with an initiative like this, you really wouldn't know where to start, right? Exactly. And it comes with a lot of challenges, and especially purely because of lack of awareness and exposure to the community. But however, we very smartly put in a plan targeting different business units within the organization.
Okay. Right.
We start, of course, talent acquisition is a part of it. But beyond that, it was, your supplier diversity. These are all your indirect opportunities. It came through volunteering, multiple. We started influencing our vendors. It's just not hiring in your organization, but how are you able to
influence people, that you work
your
with
entire work chain, right? And when you talk about challenges, of course, it took a lot of effort to go talk to various leaders, talking about it. And a lot of people, some of them agreed who believed in it, some did not, because they didn't know where to start, how to start. I mean, how will you employ a person who's visually impaired in your team, who's absolutely had no exposure or sensitization towards it? So there's a lot of kickbacks. But however, what accompanied that was another initiative that I was running within Dell was something called as Mark Awareness. Mark Awareness is another training by this group called Catalyst from the US. It's called Many Advocating Real Change. And that was an enabler for me. So while I took that up, my goal was to ensure that 100% of the leadership goes through the Mark training. And it's a very powerful training. People come in with certain views and go back with totally different views. They're more accepting, they're more understanding. And it not only focuses on disability, but across all the dimensions of diversity. And that was a huge enabler for me. People who believed that they couldn't have a person with disability or a person from the LGBTQ community went back saying that, yes, I will make an effort to have them. Right? It's a total game changer. And that really, really helped me drive, the programs and the Dell Mission 1000.
Fantastic. So, okay, now this is a new thing. I'd not heard of the Mark program. So, tell us a little more about this. And do organizations have to sign up for it, or can individuals do it? Mainly, I'm asking for the D&I leaders. Let's say first a D&I leader would want to educate themselves in it and then maybe pass on the message around the company. So, if you could just elaborate.
It is just not about Mark training, but any sensitization workshop or training could be as powerful as Mark. I mean, for me at that point, Mark seemed to be a game changer, because that was a global agenda. And it was started by Michael Dell and his executive leaders. And they went through a series of train the trainer session and then sort of drilled down. So, the involvement of leadership is so essential. When we made it a compliance, it became a compliance that everybody had to go through the Mark training. And it's about 3 to 4 hours of experiential training. And these trainings were done by the leaders. So it started drilling down from executive leaders to directors, from directors to senior managers, and eventually the business unit leads and D&I leads, and all of them picked up. And there was a very strong forum for train the trainer sessions as well. And it's a conscious effort. It's a conscious effort globally that went through. So everybody is on the same page of thinking and your goals and vision, and everything is sort of baked into it. So Catalyst is an organization that conducts these trainings. Today there are tons of organizations and opportunities for us to go and seek. And these were the times when, you didn't have enough content on the internet.
Correct. Right. We still don't actually. I mean, at least I would say in India,
details,
not
but
much.
At least the basic stuff, I think there's tons of things people can go and achieve. But most important thing is it has to
flow top down,
flow top bottom.
Yes. The leadership has to be completely on board for such initiatives. Great. So now, speaking of persons with disabilities, right? that itself is quite a tough challenge to get them jobs, get them opportunities, change the mindset of employers. When it comes to neurodiversity, that's a whole different battle, right, to fight. People aren't even aware of invisible disabilities, right? So how do you think leaders like us can drive awareness, right, and then acceptance about challenges like neurodiversity? One, of course, is India Inc. firstly prepared for accepting neurodiverse talent, and two, how can we make a difference? How can we drive some sort of acceptance or awareness?
Yeah, so that's a tough spot or a place, right? For example, I myself am a neurodivergent, right? I mean, these are invisible disabilities and nobody would see. I mean, they have their own strengths and weaknesses that, just like everybody else. But there's this pure lack of awareness, I would say, in terms of how do you deal with people people who are neurodiverse. It starts with a lot of reasonable accommodations. Starting from your hiring practices, the kind of tests you give in the hiring phase. I mean, these are things that don't. It is not inclusive of people with neurodiversity. I mean, you'll have to completely change that model. But we're really not prepared to be able to accept people with invisible disabilities purely because it's not a locomotive disability.
Exactly, it's not
Right?
visible
Nobody's in a
disability,
wheelchair,
right?
and then you don't know what to do.
What to do.
Right? It's a very vague area. So in terms of screening, in terms of regular interventions, in terms of the kind of policies you have, it even includes your infrastructural changes. You cannot have direct light, diffuse light, and more plants and more natural light, and the kind of text you use, your digital accessibility. There's tons of things. The list is endless. But there are certain things that is possible, which is very simple, low-hanging fruits that you can actually get your managers to or your leadership to go build awareness about it. Right? First is understanding is the key. And once you understand, you can always work around it. And in my case, I've been very lucky because for a long time, I did not know that I fell into that spectrum because there was absolutely no awareness until the recent years that I realized that I am a neurodivergent for various reasons. I wrote my Hindi paper 7 times. I used to do extremely well with writing and reading, writing especially, writing and forming sentences in Kannada. But when it comes to reading, I had an issue. I have issues with colors. I'm colorblind. Right? And I used to miss signals in the traffic because back in the days you had those lights. Yeah, you had those different color lights. Right now you have the arrow marks. All of this caters to people with color blindness, and all of these are invisible disabilities. But how do you cater? Right? You have to be really creative when it comes to invisible disabilities. But yeah, we're really far away. But having said that, social change is slow. It is happening. There is a lot of awareness that is getting built. I just recently heard about the Neurodiversity Summit that took place, and multiple summits that are happening. We do that in the work that we do, in the Global Inclusion Summit, and we're also looking at, skilling and upskilling people with neurodiversity. Try to bring them to the tech industry. It's a lot of effort, but there is no defined way of how do we do this because there's not enough use cases and proven cases of how do you really create that atmosphere. But there are people who are doing extremely well, and most of them are highly functional neurodiverse people like myself.
And yeah, like you said, you didn't know till like some time back.
And that doesn't stop me as well. But with certain people, it is very obvious. It's really difficult to be able to operate in a normal
typical setting. Correct.
It requires a lot of reasonable accommodation. True. And then we're really far away from that at this point. But like I said, social change is slow, but in India it is happening faster.
I still feel it goes back to where we started saying it has to flow from the top. Absolutely. So unless the top is completely sensitized, completely on board, this has to happen, then of course the slow change will trickle down. But if your top's not ready,
absolutely,
it becomes difficult.
See, it's a chain reaction right now. your executive leader could be on board to do this, but again, at the same time, your IT has to be in place. It's just not the DNI leader's job to be driving this. Your peers and your HR teams and your processes, your policies, all of that has to come hand in hand. Just like a so-called able person, we try to employ them and give them all the reasonable accommodations. Somebody, yeah, somebody is not able to come to office, then you say, okay, work from home. All of these are accommodations that we're making for ourselves because that's the mass. It's easy for us to think that way, but taking a step back and trying to be creative and trying to see how can you really make changes of somebody else, and that purely comes with awareness. And I keep using this word awareness. Awareness is because
Right.
that really is.
You're right. Yeah. Because it's the lack of knowledge most of the times which stops progress from happening, right? So it's not that you don't have the money to do it. It's not that you don't want to do it. It's just that you don't know you have to do it.
Absolutely.
So awareness is key. Awareness is certainly key. So that brings me to my next question. Or let's go back to Nasscom Foundation. You are in the business of creating jobs, and we, so to say, are in the business of fulfilling those, as a recruitment firm. Do you see crossroads? Do you see conjunctions and intersections where organizations like yours and organizations like ours can work together to make a difference? Right? Especially for these diversities. I mean, of course, recruitment for able-bodied persons is all around, right? But for diversities especially, what can an organization like Nasscom Foundation along with, let's say, Careernet come together to do?
Sure. Looking back at some of the conversations that I've had with organizations and leaders in terms of hiring diverse talent pool, especially the marginalized group, it's not that there is no talent pool or enough resumes that they can screen and hire from. But they always say there's a gap in terms of their skill sets, which is where a lot of people are not able to be in the kind of mainstream jobs. And we understand that, right? We as Nasscom Foundation or Nasscom, we really understand that because the formative years of these people aren't the same as us. The exposure isn't the same. You definitely can't take away meritocracy completely in education systems, but to some extent, yes, there are organizations who've made bold movements in terms of taking away the fact that you don't need a 10 standard or you just need minimum 10 standard but not PUC and degree. And these are some accommodations. But beyond that, while bridging that tech skills is our forte. Right. So we work with the tech industry, and we spoke about Women Wizards Rule Tech program. And that's really amazing of how we're able to build talent pool of tech leaders, of women, regardless of what job role you come from. Whether you have, you're an engineer or you've done your commerce and then you're coming to a tech role, we sort of help build their understanding right from the foundation to your intermediate to advanced. And
so it bridges the knowledge gap.
It bridges the knowledge gap.
Right.
So you also have people with, say, 15, 20 years of experience in technology coming and taking up this course. Say, for example, AI. You will have somebody who's been in AI for the last 5 years, but also coming and enrolling into the foundation of this course because we start right from the genesis of what AI is. Help build the understanding. So it really doesn't matter if you have a degree in engineering or not, but these are the kind of initiatives that we're trying to simplify to bridge that gap in the industry. So when you talk about a really talented pool of people, be it persons with disability or be it the LGBTQ community, this has been our efforts to build the talent pool in one way or the other. There's tons of skilling programs that Nasscom is also into. So while we have this huge pool of people passing out of these skilling programs, and I think that's where Careernet comes in terms of how we could really collaborate. And it's beyond that also. While I'm talking about Ability in Tech program that we're going to launch sometime in December 11th, we're launching that. And it's a very similar framework of upskilling program in technology for working persons with disability. So imagine, if we have this pool of people and you are able to connect that to employers and get them employed, and from there, once they employ, we come back again to sort of upskill them so that we bridge the gap between the front line and the mid management. And then over a period of time, it's going to be a very ambitious thought to have start working on mid management to leadership levels for persons with disability.
So at every stage, first you get them a foot in the door with a foundation, and then you kind of help skill them and take them higher. It's not just like a foot in the door, but then you get them into the system like any other able-bodied person. You integrate them beautifully.
And that really got us thinking to start this program, right? So every organization at this point is looking at how do we hire persons with disabilities, or what changes do we make so that we can start hiring persons with disabilities, building that awareness and all of that. And once the PwDs are in the organization, they're very comfortable. The organizations are also very comfortable because they're not leaving.
Correct. Once they get a job, they're fairly, once you give them the basics, they would rather stick with you. The loyalty that comes in, the bonding that comes in is amazing. I think for a PwD employee would probably stick longer with the organization than any other
Absolutely. So they don't move out of the organization also because they don't get another job.
True.
Right?
True.
They're very scared to move out because they have an opportunity and they want to stick to it. And how much are we or organizations really focused on their growth? How are we helping them grow? While you might have your L&D departments, you might have tons of curriculums and platforms and everything. Is that accessible?
Right.
Is that really catering to the need of
the person?
Concerned. You have 21 different disabilities,
but exactly.
You might not have all of them, but 3 or 4 of them that you have.
Right. What are you doing for those?
Yeah. So it becomes a challenge, and it's always a challenge. So this is our initiative as an industry body.
Ability in tech.
Ability in tech is something that we thought we should do so that the future of the PwDs in the work, in the tech workforce.
All the diversities for that matter, actually.
All the diversities. Eventually, we will start this for
LGBT
the LGBTQI community and the transgender especially.
Right.
The marginalized and the marginalized.
Yes.
And see how we can bridge this gap. So I would say the collaboration between an organization like Nasscom Foundation and Careernet will go a long way because it's like a chain, right?
Correct.
It's like a chain of supply of talent pool, and then doing it meaningfully, most importantly.
Correct. Like you supply the talent, you train the talent, and then we help meet the demand for the talent. That's wonderful. So coming to D&I leadership itself, you've been a D&I leader in a corporate, and now with Nasscom Foundation, you've done it for quite a few years. What would be your advice to either budding D&I leaders or D&I leaders that have just joined an organization which is just setting foot on its inclusion journey? Is not rather there or midway, but is just starting off. What do you think would be the low-hanging fruit? Because this is a question even I get asked often, like, where do we start? We want to do it. IND is big on the agenda, but we don't know where to start. Should we start with this diversity, that diversity, and what should be our first steps? So what would be your advice to such D&I leaders?
Well, I think it's very simple, Dilshad. It's all about exposure. Okay. We can all have the bookish knowledge of driving D&I agendas, but if we really don't make time to go out there with the community in one way or the other, expose ourselves to understand the ground realities, or be very involved in that whole ecosystem of people from the marginalized group, then it's difficult. Because, organizations have, a lot of organizations have global strategies. Something that works in the US or in the Europe might not work in India. The interventions are different. So if
the diversities themselves are quite different.
Absolutely. And if we really go by the framework and structures that has been built globally, and if you're not able to plug in your the need of the local regional thing, then it's difficult. And that can happen only if one is exposed to the community. And that's very important, which starts with your volunteering, spending time with them and hiring those people and having the right employee resource groups. And these are all very core basics of how you can, really, really manage the D&I teams meaningfully.
So you need to understand them first. Like you need to get involved, understand them first before you propagate awareness among all your other managers. I
Very,
think
very
that would be
important.
yeah.
Very important. If not, we
Correct.
will never relate to. I mean, we will only read about policies and then that
Exactly. And
implemented without
even understanding them.
without an understanding. So exposure is the key.
Right. And that's fantastic. I never thought of it that way, but you're right. I mean, unless you really sort of dirty your hands, I mean, get
Yeah.
down and really dirty your hands with the job that you're associated with, you're never going to understand it. You can't learn swimming from being outside the pool.
Exactly.
I guess you just have to dive
Absolutely.
in. So, well said, Roy, that exposure is critical.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk of another sort of exposure. You have, a lot of creative talent in you. You have been exposed to a lot of other hobbies of yours. Have been videography, photography. You've done all of that, right? And you're a fairly creative soul. I saw that in your resume. I know you as a person, so I know that you were also into music. You were into a lot of that. Again, how and where do you think there's been an overlap? And has one impacted the other? You as a creative person impacting you as the D&I leader? And what have been the intersections? Has one helped the other? Has one come in the way of the other? Or do you still manage to balance the two?
Very interesting question. Thank you so much for being nice about it.
It is something. It is a compliment because it's a talent. I mean, you have those talents.
It's like this, jack of all and master of none.
No, I think you've done fairly well, Roy. You've done fairly well with all your photography, videography, everything, and music, I guess.
Yeah, so a lot of influence again comes from my formative years and childhood days. My brother is an artist who parents and everybody pursued him to go pursue science. Pushed him to go pursue science, but got into art. He's a fine artist and he's in the creative field. So I've grown up. My brother doing a lot of art at home, and of course I had a lot of exposure to good music, I would say, at that point, because the place where my parents were working was a European congregation, and there were a lot of Europeans back in the 90s where you could get tapes of the bands that people haven't even heard of. For example, could be a very popular song by this band called Cranberries, Zombie. Right? Zombie, people know. It's a very popular song amongst the youngsters, and that's the only song that people know. And I did not know that song for a long time, but I knew the rest of all of the Cranberry songs, which people haven't even heard. I'm just saying, just an example. So I had a lot of exposure to music and art, very less exposure to television and movies, and even till date I don't relate to cartoons and your Mickey Mouse and your Tom and Jerry and all of that, and your Superman and superheroes. I don't relate to it because I've never had that exposure.
Supremely fond of all those. Okay, yeah, go on.
Music and art played a important role, and of course magazines. Time magazine that inspired me a lot to start looking at things differently. I used to be really amused in terms of how certain photographs are captured. The Nat Geo magazines and things like that. And while my brother was learning art, a part of his subject was photography. And I got really interested in photography, but unfortunately my parents couldn't afford in making me a photographer. But when I started working, I picked up photography, and I picked up music, playing the guitar at a very young age. But all of this came handy, all of this started changing the way I started looking at things, especially the kind of music that I was exposed to at a very young age, the lyrics and all of that, really changed my thinking process and the way I behave and all of that. And of course, it's translated into every work that I do. For me, my day starts with music, ends with music. So the eye for detailing, the eye for creativity is largely
comes from your creative side.
Comes from that, and you'll also see a lot of that with the kind of work that I do. For example, if you looked at the Global Inclusion Summit, that had a lot of colorful creative elements as to the whole thought process of how you curate, of bringing an artwork of a kid with autism into the whole thing is absolutely creative. We did away with using photographs of people And for example, when you're talking about disability, you will never see us using a picture of a person on a wheelchair. Instead, you have an artwork that really gets people to start thinking as to why is there an artwork for a conversation like this. So there's a lot of intersectionality that you see, how it translates into the work that I do. But of course, I do manage. I'll have to at sometimes put the creative side away when you do seriously my work. But yeah, it goes hand in hand, and it definitely complements me with everything that I do.
Wonderful, fantastic. And do you continue doing it, or are you able to manage the time for it?
It's not about the time.
Okay.
I think it's the age and the kind of people you hang out with. And I used to play for a band, and some of my bandmates are away, and it's more about every now and then you get to jam. But my room definitely has about 5 guitars hanging. There's a piano at the background, and things like that. Those are merely showpieces that I use often. But I do have my time and space when I sit with the music instruments. But music constantly plays in my car while I'm driving, when I wake up, when I go to sleep. That's always a part of my life. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. So thank you so much. You've answered most of our questions. So now coming to the most interesting part, as I said, the rapid fire.
Okay.
Right? So I'll just ask you a few choices, and you just have to, you would tell me something more about it as well, but one word answers largely. So are you a mountains person or a beaches person?
Mountain.
Mountains, fantastic. Music concert or photography shoot?
Music concert at this point. Would have been photography a few years back, but at this point, of course, it's music concert.
Music concert.
Easier.
Okay. Street smarts or book smarts?
Street smart.
Okay. And any anecdote, anything? Street smart, why and or how?
I think my life itself is
exposure
and street
Right.
smart, because I've all my formative education, all of that, have not been in great school.
Right.
Honestly, I did not learn
as much in school
I
as
did not
you.
learn English properly from school. I did not probably learn math properly from school.
Okay.
Because of all the difficulties.
Correct.
The curriculum in maths was not designed to
cater to a neurodiverse
like
person.
So
Correct.
It all happened over a period of time.
So certainly street smarts.
Certainly street smart.
Great. So learn by watching or learn by doing? I think I don't even need to ask you that. I think it's learn by doing.
Learn by doing and watching. I don't know. It's very difficult to say, but I would say learn by doing.
So then let me ask you this. The guitar, the piano, all of that, right? Did you just learn it by yourself? Exactly. So learn by doing, right? Then learn by doing. Favorite author?
I don't read a lot, but I think it's Charles Dickens.
Oh, okay. Digital books or paperbacks?
Paperbacks. But digital books at this point,
Yeah,
if I really want to
practical.
make me
More practical.
want to read, because I can really expand change the font.
Oh, for that. No, I thought you would say something like, carry more books in
I love paperbacks because I have a huge collection of books that I haven't read.
Okay.
I start and then it becomes really difficult.
Tell me about it. Same
here. There's this book called Shantaram.
Yes.
I started 8 times.
Okay.
With a lot of effort, 8 times in the last 6 years. I haven't been able to complete it. I lose patience and I put it back there.
We're in the same boat. Like I have the Kindle, but it's always the paperbacks that I go back to. So are you a lark or an owl?
Sorry?
A lark, like a morning person, or an owl, like a night person?
A morning person.
Morning person. Yeah. Oh, that I wasn't expecting. Okay, pet parent or plant parent?
What's a pet parent and plant parent?
A pet parent?
Pet parent
or a plant
Pet parent.
Pet parent. Fantastic. Okay, that kind of sums up the rapid fire. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you very much for being here. This is fantastic. We truly hope you enjoyed this episode of DEI-LOGS just as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel for more such informative and interesting dialogues on everything diversity and inclusion.